This is a case we got that started out as a workers' compensation claim. At first, this man, he was in his early 40s, had been a hard worker all his life, had a wife and children. He got his hand crushed in what's called a baler. He worked for a company that basically, a baler is a big machine that basically crushes things. And he would take hollowed out transformers from power lines, and he'd put them in this baler, and hydraulics would crush that device to recycle it. Well, there's a device in there. It was a pin. It was a metal pin, and this device is probably 2 inches in diameter by 8 to 10 inches long, that over time it fatigued and it broke. So the top fell on the bottom, and his hand was in there, okay? He ended up losing his hand.
Welcome to the Law Talk Podcast, where we take you behind the curtains of a successful personal injury law firm. This season, attorneys at Hollis, Wright will discuss several comeback stories involving real clients of the firm. Find out through specific cases and clients how the Hollis Wright attorneys turn oftentimes catastrophic injuries and situations into comeback stories. Follow along as attorneys detail various cases, including how the injury occurred, how the firm thoroughly investigated the case, how the firm provided the best possible outcome for the client, and how the client is today. Welcome into the Law Talk Podcast. David Lamb here, along with Allwin Horn, an attorney here at the firm Hollis Wright. Allwin, good to see you, as always.
Good to see you again, David. Thanks for having me here again.
Looking forward to our conversation. So let's dig a little bit about your background and what you do specifically, because you really have a pretty narrow area of expertise relative to workers' compensation. So kind of help us understand with the majority of the cases that you handle here at Hollis.
And narrow or very specialized is what I've been doing for pretty much the last 27 years. Is it's kind of a niche I got involved in is representing people that are injured on the job in the workforce, whether that's in an industrial setting, could be somebody driving an 18-wheeler down the road that's in an automobile accident. Could be someone that works at Walmart, but is representing people that have injuries on the job and people that get hurt on the job. Those claims are covered by a specific code of the Alabama statutes. It's called the Workers' Compensation Act. There's specific regs and rules, calculations for damages, ways to get medical treatment. So that's my focus.
What about that appealed to you some almost 30 years ago now?
Well, I had a lot of people that came. Let me put it to you this way. The Alabama Workers' Compensation Act and the way in which people obtain medical treatment, but more importantly, how they're compensated when they get hurt and they have to come out of work, was created in 1984. So it was created, roughly 10, 15 years before I started practicing law, and the numbers and figures used to compensate these people haven't changed. In other words, in 45 years, if my math's right, roughly that, nothing's changed in terms of the value dollars people can get in the Workers' Compensation Act.
That doesn't sound right.
You think about 1984, what it cost to buy a ticket to go to Legion Field for a college football game. $10 maybe, and what are they now, 75? What a Coca-Cola cost out of the machine? 25 cents, and what are they, $2.50 now? So the point is, to answer your question is, people would come to me that really needed help. They were hurting. I had hardworking people that had families, a lot of single parents, single moms oftentimes, or whether they were married families. And here they were hurt. They weren't making their regular wages. They couldn't pay their bills, and they needed help. And at the same time, they're battling an insurance company that doesn't even want to do the little bit they're required to do in the Alabama Workers' Compensation Act. Right. People came to me needing help, and I'm inclined to help people.
Yeah. This is one of those areas that matters to me, because I had a friend whose dad got hurt on the job, settled with the company, did not seek any legal help at all. The company discouraged him from doing so.
Sure that didn't
said
go
we'll just cut you a check and we'll take care of you. And he's unable to work now. The sign still delivered. It's just to me it's a tragic story because he certainly could have used some legal representation. This is one of those areas where, boy, if you get this wrong, the consequences can really be awful.
That's a great point. A lot of times we have people that come to us that want advice. They come, they call, they just want advice, and I don't mind giving people advice and helping them through that, because once you get the feel for it and you understand what you're doing, it's not complicated. But as a layperson who doesn't do it, it is complicated. There are a lot of rules to follow. insurance, when you have a job-related injury and you start, you open up a claim, you're dealing with an insurance adjuster and sometimes in-house lawyer for a company, but people that have been versed in the law. Okay, they know what they're doing, and their job ultimately is, and I'm not saying people won't help others, but their job is to save money and keep expenses down, pay as little money towards this claim as possible and be done with it. So that is why it is so smart to get a lawyer. But we have a lot of people, probably like was it your father who you knew?
A friend
that did not want to rock the boat and upset their employer.
Right.
And when at the end of the day, they should have looked out for their own best interest.
What do you feel your job as an attorney is whenever you go into one of these cases?
It is to make sure my client is made aware of what's going on, made aware of what their rights are, and what their rights are and what they could be entitled to legally, and then to make sure they get that. A lot of times we might, talking about the inadequacy of the Workers' Compensation Act, I'm very candid with my clients, and I try to establish on the front end, what the real possibilities are in terms of recovering compensation in a case. And I'm not gonna blow smoke, as they say, to create a false narrative, because if I create false expectations on somebody, 2 months, 6 months, a year down the road, this case isn't going to resolve because I've created a false expectation.
Right. Let's break this down. So I hope this never happens to anyone listening, but if you or someone is in a situation where you think you may have a workman's comp or a liability case here, what do you tell people if they are injured on the job? What's your advice to them?
Something to focus on, and here's what's important about a workers' compensation case. The most important time, in my opinion, in a workers' compensation case for the employee is to make sure that they report it and they get medical treatment. And let me explain why. The value of a workers' compensation case is based on the degree of permanent injury that someone has incurred as a job-related injury. The only way you really know if you have a permanent injury that's going to affect your ability to work in your same profession or not work at all. And a lot of these injuries happen, you don't know what the injury is until you get diagnostics or MRIs or see a specialist.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to report the injury and get to a doctor. Insurance companies would like to delay this as long as possible. They want to push you down the road. Why is it taking so long to get my claim open up when you go report it to the employer? Why is it so long for an insurance company to send me to a doctor? Well, the reason it's taken so long is because they don't want to send you to a doctor, because they don't want a diagnostic done, because they don't want to find out you need a back surgery that's going to cost them money. So the most important time when you know you're hurt or something's happened is report it and get to a doctor. Okay. And if you're getting the runaround, you need to get to a lawyer.
Right. Get somebody to fight for you. So medical care.
Yeah.
Sometimes, especially if you're out of work, finances may be a challenge.
Well, that's the point of the Workers' Compensation Act provides, a few categories of benefits. Number one, if you're hurt on the job and a doctor takes you out of work, you're entitled to your temporary total disability, which is 2/3 of your average weekly wage. I mean, even though your bills don't drop down to 2/3 of your average weekly wages, that's what they're entitled to pay.
Right.
So during this time, you're getting medical treatment, or you should be sent to a specialist, and until you get to a specialist and find out what's wrong, you're in a holding pattern. And so you have those benefits, then they're required to pay your medical treatment. They get to pick the doctors, but you need to get to a doctor to determine what the course of treatment is or what your injury is, because ultimately at the end of the day, you'd be entitled to some form of permanent compensation benefits.
An issue like this can really knock you down and almost out. So you've got an interesting comeback story of a case that you actually, this is an actual client.
It's an actual client a few years ago, and I'll just call him Mr. Clark.
Okay.
Mr. Clark was 64 years old, and it's an example of how the insurance company used all the time and money in the world that they have, that an indigent employee that's supporting a family, relying on their paychecks to pay a bill, doesn't have.
Right.
And what happened is Mr. Clark was 64. He'd been working for the same trucking company for probably like 24 years. He had an injury, let's just say it was March of 20, and he reported it, and he talked to his employer, and they kind of wanted to push it down the road. So he said, okay, let me just go to my own doctor. He did, and then 3 months later, he re-injures his back again in a loading event. So this time he can tell something's wrong with him. So he goes back to his employer, opens up a claim. They delay it, but they eventually send him to a doctor. So they send him to the doctor. The doctor, who's a surgeon up at a good facility in Huntsville, says you're going to need a 2-level cervical fusion. It's a $250,000 procedure. Wow. The workers' compensation insurance industry or companies and the employer, they have the right to basically take the handpicked doctor they had, take those notes and records, even though they chose this doctor, and then send it to somebody on their payroll in a different state under something called peer review. They get to review that doctor's decision, and they told Mr. Clark, we're not paying for this because it's not medically necessary. Our doctor, that has an office up in Massachusetts, says that he doesn't agree with this doctor, and we're done on the treatment. So Mr. Clark came to me. If they had just done what they were supposed to do, he never would have come to me. Right. So he came to me during this time. They've cut off his benefits. They've denied his medical treatment. So he's unable to work. He's in pain. And so what can he do? So what we did is I took the case on. I knew it was going to take time and money. Mm-hmm. We had to go, we filed what's the lawsuit, filed a motion for compensability hearing, which takes about 5 to 6 months from the time he came to me to get to. Okay. We put about $5,000 into the case. We took doctors' depositions. We took other people's depositions. And this whole time, the insurance companies, what they're doing is they were saying, hey, why don't you settle this case with us? Mm-hmm. We'll pay you some money to go away. Right. Less than what it's worth, less than what that surgery is worth, but enough to tempt him and tease him. Mm-hmm. And anyway, he said no. Mr. Clark said, no, I'm going to hang in here. I'm so mad. I'm so fired up. So we went through that process while he was starving in pain. And the day before our compensability hearing, what happens, the insurance company calls and said, you know what, we're going to pay this. It's compensable. We're going to start giving him his weekly checks. And he had the surgery. Really? So, my point is, it was just a front to try to make people go away. But it's difficult. You starve people out. Sometimes they make decisions they shouldn't from financial reasons.
Yeah, and imagine trying to go through that without legal representation. Well, you would be intimidated to me. I would be intimidated immediately.
There are a lot of people that wouldn't have even called an attorney and would have settled out.
Because you also don't know, as a client, you don't even know what's fair. You've tried many cases. You know what's fair and what's not. I would have no idea what is fair and what's not.
Mr. Clark was a very good client. He listened to us. He gave my advice. A lot of times people might not want to hear what we say.
Right, yeah.
Because there's not a whole bunch of good to say in the Workers' Compensation Act. But he did listen. He won. Not only did he get his surgery, but he also ended up, after he recovered from surgery, getting a sizable settlement in that case. Because he at his age and what he went through, it was what we consider a permanent total disability settlement.
Wow. That's a cool comeback story.
So it was a good one.
All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more with Allwin Horn. So stick around. More of the Law Talk podcast coming right up.
Hollis Wright has assembled one of the best trial teams in the state of Alabama. A team that doesn't quit, a team that never backs down, a team that has the skills to take your case all the way. Let Hollis Wright tell your comeback story.
The attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Welcome back into the Law Talk podcast. David Lamb here with Allwin Horn from the firm of Hollis Wright here in Birmingham, Alabama, talking about some interesting comeback stories relative to matters like workers' compensation. Allwin, when we went to break, we were talking about, first of all, the deck seems kind of stacked against somebody who doesn't get legal representation, because I have no idea how you would navigate those complicated waters. But even the inadequate compensation and some of the offers that you get. So third party involvement, that's an important aspect.
It is, and we talk about, and you touched on it, the inadequacy of the Workers' Compensation Act. We talk about the year it was created, what was the value of the dollar then versus now, what are your costs of living then versus now.
Is this a federal or is this state of Alabama?
It is state of Alabama.
So it's state of Alabama. And has it been discussed raising.
There have been some great lawyers here in the state of Alabama that I know that have been on committees for the last decade trying to get these laws changed.
Okay.
Going through committee,
No-
the legislative
no luck.
process, and it's gotten to the front door and it gets shut down every time because you have doctors involved in it in their committees as well as the employers in their committees, and nothing's changed.
Yeah.
But the point is that oftentimes, or I should say every time, especially with people, and I'm not by any means saying those that have a shoulder surgery versus somebody that get their hand cut off, every claim is equal to us, and we represent the people vigorously. But you clearly have on occasions people that have suffered such catastrophic injuries, they're not going to be able to work again.
Right.
And when you talk about what the workers' compensation payments would be, a lot of times weekly for the rest of their life at 2/3 of what their average wages was, and sometimes you can negotiate a lump sum settlement, it would be nothing compared to what they would make over their life expectancy.
Right.
So what you want to do, and we always do this, is you want to try to find what's called a third-party claim, a claim against another entity or maybe even the co-employee that allows you to get outside the limited damages of the Workers' Compensation Act. Okay, and because the general rule is if you're injured on the job in the on the job, the Alabama Workers' Compensation Act is your exclusive remedy of recovery. Those are the damages you get, which is just a percentage of your wages. So what we like to do in a lot of cases is we will file a workers' compensation claim. We will engage in what's called discovery, where we get to send written questions, request documentation as to why maybe a machine failed or this accident occurred in order to identify potential other third parties, and then we can hire experts to tell us if there's someone else to go after.
Yeah. And you also have another interesting story, a former client of yours. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we'll call him Mr. Truss, and this also was in probably the last 3 to 5 years, and this is a case we got that started out as a workers' compensation claim. At first, this man, he was in his early 40s, had been a hard worker all his life, had a wife and children. He got his hand crushed in what's called a baler. He worked for a company that basically, a baler is a big machine that basically crushes things. And he would take hollowed out transformers from power lines, and he'd put them in this baler, and hydraulics would crush that device to recycle it. Well, there's a device in there. It was a pin. It was a metal pin in this device. It's probably 2 inches in diameter by 8 to 10 inches long, that over time it fatigued and it broke. So the top fell on the bottom, and his hand was in there, okay? This is the case he ended up losing his hand. Started as crush, ended up losing his hand. He wasn't going to be able to go back to work his dominant hand. And
how old? He was in his 40s?
He was in his 40s.
So he had plenty of work.
And a
left.
wife and 2 children, and she was so supportive. Really good family. It takes family, to get you through that.
Yeah.
So, this is the case. I got Josh Wright involved, and he deserves a lot of the credit, the overwhelming majority of the credit, and what he did to get involved and get some experts to identify third parties we could file a claim against, where you get mental anguish, you get pain and suffering, you get future lost wages, to build up a case that could really compensate him and take care of him and his family for the rest of his life. And we were successful in doing it.
Oh, wow.
So, I can go and elaborate on that. One of the defendants was this pin that we referred to in this baler that failed or broke. It was manufacturer provided. It was a safety device because it kept things in position. And it had been removed by the employer and then rebuilt by a third party.
Oh, wow.
Now, number one, the employer, and this is a specific section in the Workers' Compensation Act, it's called a co-employee claim. We had to name the co-employees who were upper management or safety directors who removed this pin and had it rebuilt. So we removed a manufacturer-provided safety device. They had it rebuilt, but when they had it rebuilt, it wasn't built with the proper tensile strength. It was a different type of metal, and they kept the pin as they should have when it broke, because they probably knew this was.
How did you all find this out? I'm curious.
And that's a good point. Josh we got plenty.
So you had an expert?
Plenty of experts that came in that
goodness.
we hired, and they got the pin. They did testing on it to determine that it wasn't properly built. So basically, we had a co-employee claim against the people that removed this pin. Instead of going to the manufacturer and doing it the right way, probably because it cost them more money, they hired somebody local. They just said, "Hey, stick this thing in there."
Yeah.
And so we had 2 claims against other parties.
I'm curious, how much of value is like the experience of knowing where to look and what questions to ask.
It's tremendous. And, this firm has lawyers that probably on average have been practicing 25 years, and collectively, the firms have had their doors open since the 90s, or everybody's been practicing since then. And this firm's not afraid to invest large sums of money in cases. We're talking about, experts aren't cheap,
Right.
Depositions aren't cheap, to try to prove a case to success. And when you have the experience and you know what to look for, as well as who the experts are to hire, it's really beneficial. But something I always tell my clients is I'm not betting on the Saturday football game, because I'm betting my money on your case. And that's how I look at it. So it's an investment we take. We are very serious about it because we want you to recover and maximize your benefits.
How did it end up with Mr. Truss?
Mr. Truss ended up, after about a year of litigation, and the defendant filed what's referred to as motion for summary judgment, trying to say we couldn't prove our case, getting thrown out. Josh went up there and argued those cases, those motions, and 1 week before trial, Josh got Mr. Truss a tremendous sum of money. He was very happy. He and his wife, it was life-changing to them. I don't know if it was a confidential settlement or not, but it was life-changing. They were taken care of. And I can remember how happy and they were, and appreciative they were of the hard work that was put into that case.
Well, just imagine facing the reality that you may have to live the rest of your life without a hand and having no idea how you're going to raise your kids, pay your bills.
If you were to ask Mr. Truss, hey, man, let me cut your hand off and I'll give you X amount of money, regardless of what it was, the answer is no. Right. But there were times throughout that process, I can remember several times just meeting with them, consoling them. He's like he thought he was at the end. But he held in there. His family supported him, his wife. And fortunately, while money's not everything, at least can provide the comforts that he needed just to, and more so,
and take
to take
some
care
of the
his
stress
family.
off. Yeah,
That's right.
Imagine.
That's right.
So where, as we kind of wrap things up, what's the lesson, what's the takeaway from Mr. Truss and Mr. Clark?
I'm going to say this. The takeaway is this. We have lawyers in this firm that are well-versed in all areas of the law. And it is always good to come to a firm that can handle every aspect of your case and find every avenue of recovery. We have people in this firm, lawyers in this firm, that focus or specialize in different areas of practice. And we build off each other. So here's the thing. At a minimum, call a lawyer. Give us a call. We'll talk to you. You don't have to hire us if you call us. But if you have an injury claim and you think you're being done wrong, or you have an injury claim and you want some advice, give us a call, because you need to come to a law firm that knows what they're doing and has the finances and the resources to support a case and pursue it.
Yeah, this is one of those areas where you certainly don't want to go it alone.
I agree 100%. That's why I guess I'm still in it after about 27 years.
And doing a great job.
Well, thank you.
Allwin, it's always good to see you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, David. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Really good stuff. Allwin Horn, you'll find him on the Hollis Wright website, hollis-wright.com. Also, you can learn more about him and the other attorneys here at Hollis Wright, as well as the story of the firm, ways you can get in touch with them. All of that on the website. Also, check them out on social media as well. Just search the term Hollis Wright, and you'll be able to find them easily. They do a great job there on social media, keeping in touch and responding to you. And you guys are serious about responding. When someone calls or emails, they're going to get a response, aren't they?
Call, email, text. My cell number's on my card, so that's how we work.
And you will get a response. It's important. It's part of the ethic here, the culture here at Hollis Wright. Hey, thanks to Allwin Horn, and thanks to you for listening. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next time here on the Law Talk Podcast.